I'm super excited to be here today because we get to talk about winter squash and the biodiversity of these squash. You can actually save your seed for next year from these squash. So you can actually cut these open, and part of the cleaning process with any kind of winter squash is actually to cut this open and remove some of those seeds. And the only thing to keep in mind with squash is that there is a tremendous amount of genetic diversity. So anybody who has a compost pile and has had squash come out of that compost pile knows that you get some pretty funky variants. And that's okay, because sometimes you might be creating your new hybrid, your new cross of something, and that could be really exciting and new. So you want to make sure you got a lot of compost or aged manures in your soil, but you take one single seed. And out here in the Pikes Peak region, you plant anytime between usually late April and late May, and if you get your seeds in the ground around that time, you're going to have a really good harvest. But it is kind of a rush to get it into the ground because these things take all year to grow. Really, what we're talking about is how do we use this stuff, right? So when we grow these on a plant, for a delicata plant, I might expect to get at least a dozen of these off of a really healthy plant, right? So I have all this great food, and I think a lot of people look at it and it's beautiful, but now how do I use that food?
So many different things. You can use it in desserts, you can use it in soup, you can use it as snacks on the go, you can use it for anything.
You know, one of the first things we wanted to talk about in making this winter squash soup is how to do a traditional stock.
You just use peels from like onions and garlic that you would normally throw away. So we have those here. You could also use things like carrot tops, celery tops, carrot peels, any root hardy vegetable can go in a stock. And then you just saute and like sweat. Okay, saute is high heat, little fat.
Okay.
That's what saute means.
Okay.
Sweat is pretty much the same amount of fat, but you're just doing it on a lower heat for longer. And then you just add water and then let it simmer for hours. I mean, you could even do it in a crock pot if you didn't want to leave your stove on for that long.
The first step in the pot is really to add some oil, and then what are we doing after that?
Put your aromatics in, such as onions and garlic. You want to start with good base flavor, so then your soup just keeps building and building and building. Always make sure your knife is sharp. It is so much easier to do anything when you're cutting with a sharp knife, and it's a lot safer as well, especially with these super hardy squash. You have these thick skins you have to get to. So I would cut this end off and this end off, and then I would just cut it this way, cover them in oil, and then roast them full halves.